this brief 2-week unit called Cultural Diversity and Health, we will be looking at two distinct but interrelated issues. The first, which we will look at this week, has to do with how challenging and difficult it is to deliver quality healthcare in our increasingly multicultural society. Delivering healthcare well requires mutual understanding, good communication, and trust between patient and providers. But when the patient and his or her provider come from very different cultural groups, those matters are difficult to achieve. The second issue we will look at next week has to do with what are called health disparities. That is to say, significant differences in health status, mortality rates related to particular illnesses or injuries, and access to quality health care between different population groups, including, but not limited, to different cultural groups. There is also ample evidence of significant health disparities related to race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and even related to geography, whether one lives in a rural or an urban area, for example. This unit will also be a way of introducing you to the relevance of some new academic disciplines to the health humanities. To this point, we have been focused on traditional humanities disciplines: English, literature, literary studies, film studies. But now, as we begin to look at our multicultural reality and health disparities, we'll bring the social sciences to bear on our understanding of health and health care. We'll be looking at things like economics, political science, sociology, cultural studies, even legal studies, and the contributions they make to the health humanities. Let's begin by thinking a bit about our multicultural reality. North America, I think we could say, has been multicultural from the beginning. That is to say, even before the beginning of the arrival of European colonists. Though we tend to lump all the indigenous peoples of North America together as one, the fact of the matter is we now know they had a variety of languages, a variety of religious beliefs, and worldviews. Of course, with the coming of European settlers, that multicultural reality became significantly more complex. The Spanish came first, of course, and then a great many English, peppered with a variety of Dutch and German settlers as well. It wasn't long, of course, until they began to force the immigration of peoples from the West African coast to serve as slaves. Again, we shouldn't make the mistake in thinking about those peoples that we've sometimes made with the indigenous population. The people who were brought here as slaves didn't think of themselves as Africans. They thought of themselves as Igbo and Yoruba and Akan. It was Europeans who invented the category of African. So there was actually a great deal of cultural complexity among those slaves. They added African traditional religious traditions and even Islam to the mix of Catholic and Protestant and even a few Jewish peoples who were already here. Across our history, this, what we might call original multicultural reality, became even more complex. As Europeans occupied the entire North American continent, moving westward, they met Japanese and Chinese immigrants who helped build the mines and the railroads that united the country. Later, in the mid-19th century, thousands of Irish and Scottish people moved to North America. And then, of course, with the Industrial Revolution of the late 19th century and early 20th century, great numbers of Southern Europeans were added to the mix, especially Italians. Now, while the Spanish were here early, The Hispanic population among us has only dramatically increased in the 20th and 21st centuries, as millions have immigrated from Mexico and Central America to avoid violence and corruption and poverty, and to seek new economic opportunities and freedom. The economic and political connections and military connections that the United States has forged around the world as a global empire has brought us into relationship with a variety of other peoples, and some of them have come to live among us. While it's fair to say that the United States remains a largely or a majority WASP nation, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the fact of the matter is the size of that majority has been diminishing, and diminishing dramatically in the last few decades. And it won't be long until white Anglo-Saxon Protestants are no longer the majority, even here. Look at this simple graph based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau as to how much our situation has changed just between 1970 and 2010. Whereas in 1970, 80% of folks in the United States identified as white, and only 11% as black and 4% as Latino. Now that white majority is down to 64%, down 20%, and the Latino population has increased dramatically, and even the African American population is at a higher percentage. Of course, add to that the 5% of Asian Pacific Islanders who barely showed up on the graph in 1970 and now constitute 5% of our population. And take a look at this graphic presentation of data related to religious affiliation or religious preference in the United States. In 1972, Protestants represented 63% of the population, but look, that those Protestants are no longer a majority as of 2010, only 47%. And it's not as if they have been replaced by Catholics. Catholics were 27% in 1972 and down to 25% as of 2010. But look at the numbers that have grown, particularly. Jewish has stayed about the same. It's that other category that represents our increased diversity. That other represents Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus. And notice also, many would find interesting that those who identify as none, or you might say non-believers or secular people, have grown from 5% of the population in 1972 to 18% today. I also wanted to look at some of this data as it relates to Virginia itself. This pie graph shows the situation in Virginia in 2014. Now notice we are significantly more white than the country as a whole. Still 63% of our population identifies as white, but the African American population is nearly 20%, and the Hispanic or Latino population about 9%, Asian or Asian Pacific 6.3%. So that diversity that we saw represented in the national statistics also reflects the reality in Virginia, though as I said, Virginia remains significantly whiter than the nation as a whole.